we'll see how that all goes. I'm glad I got that out before you started recording.
Yeah.
Okay. They don't know I have all of that.
Okay. Well, we'll bring you back on to feature your 85-page book, but now why don't we get going with our CTIPP can call? It's 2 minutes after. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the April CTIPP can call. I don't know about where you are, but here in Washington, April is just beautiful. Everything's turning green and the azaleas are popping and the dogwoods are popping. It's really a time of renewal. So we hope all of you are feeling renewed, and we look forward to you sharing the next hour and a half with us. Our featured speaker today, it snowed in various parts of Pennsylvania yesterday. Well, so much for renewal. Actually, I think T.S. Eliot got it right. April's the cruelest month. So, but anyway, our featured speaker today is one of the stars of the Prevent Child Abuse world, Rebecca Roebuck. We'll be talking about a new model program that's developing to reduce trauma in foster care. And in addition, we're going to feature the new staff of CTIPP can. April is the 1-year anniversary of Jesse's tenure as executive director. And we're celebrating it by introducing, for the first time, he has 3 terrific staff people. He's going to be giving an opportunity to talk about the great work they're doing. So that's today's CTIPP can call. Before I turn it over to Jesse, there are 3 opportunities that CTIPP is throwing out. We hope you will join some or all of them. First, for the last 3.5 months, CTIPP, along with Paces Connection and the National Prevent Science Coalition, has been putting on a series of workshops every other Friday, some 3 to 4 hours, all designed to move the trauma-informed movement forward. Our next one is April 29th. It's going to be on policy. We're going to have presentations on both at the congressional level and at the state level, what's happening with trauma-informed policy. We have got a great lineup from people at all levels, from Zeke Cohn at the City Council of Baltimore on to people working for Congress. And if you haven't seen any of the earlier ones, I know, Jesse, can you show the ones we've done already? You can catch the replays on CTIPP's website. Each one of those has just been packed with valuable information. Dave was one of our presenters and one who provided a lot of great information on how to create a trauma-informed state entity. So that's one opportunity we want to put out there for you. Secondly, CTIPP, along with Paces Connection and the National Prevention Science Center Coalition, are going to be creating a national coalition of local and state coalitions. There are a growing number of you. You're all doing great work, but right now you haven't created that national voice because you're each operating in your own little community. And we're going to create a national coalition. The analogy I give is each one of you are creating ripples. If we tie all of you together, we're going to create a real powerful current that will reach Washington, will reach your state capital, and will really push the movement forward. So we're going to be having some information coming out of the next month and asking you to sign up if you're part of a coalition. If you're not part of a coalition, go ahead and create one, because we think cross-sector coalitions are the most effective tools for making states and communities trauma-informed. And then finally, we're creating communities of practice. We have one already for higher education, one for health, one for faith-based, and one for law enforcement. And these are opportunities for people working in a particular sector to come together and talk about their challenges and their successes in creating trauma-informed communities in that sector. You can find information about that on the CTIPP website. And if you want to create one in one of the areas other than the ones I mentioned, please let us know. We're asking people to take the lead, create it, share it, host it, an opportunity for you to share your trials, tribulations, and successes with people who are going through exactly what you're going through. So please think about a community in practice, whether it's in K through 12, early childhood, social services, so many different areas that people are creating trauma-informed sectors, and create a community of practice so you're sharing with people who are having again the same experiences you have. So those are our 3 CTIPP initiatives. I now want to turn the mic over to my co-host, Jesse Kohler, who's the executive director of CTIPP and celebrating his 1-year anniversary, and has done just phenomenal things during that 1 year. So Jesse, welcome and congratulations on a great job.
Thank you, Dan. The good news is that the best days are well ahead of us with the incredible team that we've been able to build, and certainly with all of the input and expertise that Dan and other advisors and board members have provided to CTIPP and all of you. We are only as strong as the community that we are surrounded by, and we are so fortunate to be surrounded by a growing, wonderful community that is engaged in incredible work all over the country, starting to look like it's all over the world. We have engaged with some pretty cool groups outside of the US as well. And like Dan said, we have spent the last several months working to develop a team, build a team of folks who bring different areas of expertise to add to the work that we've already been doing with CTIPP. So I am so thrilled to invite my colleagues, Whitney Maris, Jen Kurt, and Laura Quigley, to discuss their work that they are doing with CTIPP and with the Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice. Just to quickly mention, because I've never really done this on one of these calls and I am working out my new muscles in my evolving role as team members take on roles for the organization, is that as our team grows, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we do rely on donations and support to keep this work going. And so I just wanted to put that out there. I recognize that we are asking for all of our advocates to give in whatever way they can. So if that looks like advocating, and there will be an opportunity in a bit for you to do just that, that is perfect. If there is also financial support or other people that we can bring into the fold to express the great work that CTIPP is doing and to be able to make connections there, that is also great. And so I just want to throw the donate tab up into the chat. Feel free to look, feel free to share to help us continue to grow, scale, and sustain the work that we have been doing. I know that you'll be as thrilled to meet the team members that are working alongside me, that I get to learn from every day as much as I am. And so I will start by introducing Jen, and then we'll go to Laura and Whitney, just alphabetical through the line of first names. So Jen, I turn it over to you to introduce yourself to the CTIPP CAN family.
Hello, family. My name is Jen. I am CTIPP's new Director of Government Affairs. I have been working in the trauma recovery space for the last 10 years. I started out doing grassroots organizing at the collegiate level. And then most recently, I served Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley for the last 3 years in the House of Representatives. And I was a policy advisor on financial services policy, as well as climate policy and trauma and mental health. So I worked with CTIPP for a couple of years on trauma-related policy and was always really impressed and excited by the work and the growing campaign. And so I'm really excited to join the team and work on that outside government strategy. And the scope of my work is really working with members of Congress, the executive branch, and the agencies to translate the advocacy in our community into asks for those entities, and then to translate back to our advocates what's happening in Washington, D.C. and among these entities. So I'm pleased to be here and proud to serve.
We are thrilled to have you, Jen. Thank you so much. Laura?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Laura Quigley. Super excited to be with y'all. I have been in communications and public affairs now for 20 years. So while I'm new to the trauma-informed space, I've got a lot of experience doing content strategy, messaging, crisis communications, public relations, social media, website development, all the things. So really excited to really bring the storytelling element to what CTIPP is doing, as well as, we're going through a major overhaul right now on our website, social media, our branding guidelines, just trying to zhuzh everything up to the next level. And I really look forward to working with all of you and helping you amplify and elevate the work you're doing, not only on CTIPP's communication channels, but also with, your local media, national media, that sort of thing.
Thanks, Laura. And Whitney, you came off mute, so go ahead, please.
You bet. Thank you so much. Hello, all. Such a pleasure to be with you here today. My name is Whitney Maris, and I am delighted to be CTIPP's Director of Trauma-Informed Practice and System Transformation, which is certainly a mouthful. And what that means is that I support this talented team in integrating and operationalizing the principles of a trauma-informed approach in all aspects of our work. And some of the concrete ways that I'm supporting the team right now is that I'm beginning to flesh out the details of the dimensions related to CTIPP's comprehensive vision, including putting together key information related to trauma-informed resilience building and healing-centered policy and practice responses that make sense to prioritize in order to advance our transformative change efforts. And in addition, I'm proud to be supporting CTIPP's continued efforts to make advocacy approachable and accessible by providing several informational modules and supplemental reflective skill building activities related to topics ranging from an entry-level introduction to the legislative process to more granular and nuanced topics like integrating the values and principles of trauma-informed practices into more advanced advocacy work. And our best hope is that this series continues to grow as we continue to work in partnership with people with unique experience and expertise so that we can provide a platform through which anyone and everyone can find a space that they can connect with and this movement that aligns with their strengths, skills, and values. And so that's the work that I am doing. So proud to be with you. Can't tell you how jazzed I am and how grateful and humbled I am by this opportunity to do the work alongside all of you on this call and all of the people making an impact worldwide. And I suppose I pass it back to you here, Jesse.
Thank you, Whitney. Thank you, everyone, for the kind words in the chat. And just to mention again, we consider all of you to be a part of our team in that comprehensive vision that Whitney was talking about. As we continue to flesh that out, we will continue to look for community feedback, what you're seeing in the field, what your ideas are, so that way we can grow this together. And like Laura said, we want to help support your story, the work that you are able to tell at the local, state, and federal level with CTIPP, or just in terms of supporting and promoting the work that you all do. And so Jen is about to walk through how they are able to support very directly your outreach to your own congressional members. Right now, we are promoting an ask for the fiscal year 2023 appropriations bill. And so Jen, I will turn it over to you to go over the call to action. And we are going to try something that we've never done on CTIPP Can before. And I am very, very excited for this trial. So Jen, I'll turn it over to you to explain what we're going to do.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to take the mic for the next 20 minutes or so. I want to talk through two really urgent initiatives that CTIPP is helping to champion in Congress that we could use your help on. The first one is related to the federal budget for FY23. It's often said that the federal budget is a statement of our country's values. We really want that to reflect the values of attending to mental health, attending to preventing trauma, and a lot of the values that we have. I'm going to share my screen because I have a couple of slides. I can't share my screen. I can share my screen now. Thank you so much, Jesse. Let's see if this will work. Is it showing in slideshow view? Perfect. Yep. Thank you so much. Okay, so I don't need to sort of tell you all what a crisis we are facing in terms of youth mental health. As you know, children are returning to classrooms. That doesn't mean that they're not bringing with them every day in their emotional backpack the trauma that they've occurred during the pandemic, the trauma of loss, of instability, of isolation. And so it's really, really important, of course, as you know, that we are providing that trauma-informed support and helping shift schools to become trauma-informed to really help address that head on in this next year and beyond. And so we are championing 2 combined asks today. And the first portion of that ask is that, you know, experts, mental health experts recommend that there is 1 school counselor for every 250 students, 1 school social worker for every 250 students, 1 school psychologist for every 500 students. But we know that the national ratio is well beyond that. So there's almost double, or there's more than double the number of students ratio to these providers. And, you know, they provide really, really important, you know, strong adult, you know, people in these children's lives, and they're, you know, experts in their field. So it's so important that now more than ever, we're increasing the number of school-based mental health professionals. And so the first part of our ask is $1 billion for the Safe Schools National Activities Program. This helps school districts to recruit and train and then retain these school-based mental health professionals. So it creates that pipeline, and then it helps the school districts to pay these often underpaid, you know, school-based mental health professionals, which are such a critical and life-saving resources to schools, especially hard to reach schools, rural schools, under-resourced schools. So that's a really important piece here. And then, of course, there's the trauma-informed aspect, because having these trained professionals in the schools is really important, but these are only a number of professionals. We need systems change, right? We need a whole school approach to make the entire school and all the adults trauma-informed and shift towards trauma-informed practices and ways of dealing with different disruptions and students' experiences. Trauma-informed practices in schools have, of course, decreased expulsions, suspensions, and negative behavior referrals. So as part of this program request, we're also requesting that the Department of Education is encouraging the grantees that are receiving this money to bring in these professionals, that they use it for trauma-informed practices education. So if you would like, what would be really helpful is Congressman Panetta from California, Donald Payne Jr. from New Jersey, and Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania are leading a letter to members of to the Appropriations Committee, making this request on our behalf. And one of the best ways that we can make sure that this request, this $1 billion, ends up in the final appropriations bill is if we get as many members of Congress to sign on to their letter as possible. And the deadline for that letter to sign on is today. And so if you feel so moved, what would be fantastic is if we could take 10 minutes here and have you call your member of Congress. So we have a script here that you can use, or you can sort of, explain, tell your story however you'd like. It's important when calling your member of Congress to, of course, put your name, but also your street address and then your email address. This is just about the system in which they write down your comments. They just need those things in order to really log it in the system to verify you're a constituent and then make sure they're getting you a request. So if you don't know who your member of Congress is, if you do know who your member of Congress is, you can look up their website and then call their Washington, D.C. office, or it's often called their Capitol Hill office. If you don't know who it is, you can call the number on this screen. That's the Congress switchboard. So someone will enter the phone, ask how they can help you. You can tell them your zip code. They can look up your member of Congress, or you can look that up for yourself by going to house.gov. On the top right-hand corner, it allows you to enter your zip code, and then it will pop up who your member of Congress is, and then you can click to their website and then look up their phone number. So if you've never done this before, yes, Jesse.
One quick question, Jen. On the talking points, we have 202-224-3121. And from a Google search, it looks like it is 224, not 225.
224 is for the Senate, and we're focusing on the House.
Thank you so much. This was a learning opportunity for all of us. I'll go back on mute now.
Thanks. So we're just going to pause right now just for about 10 minutes for whoever would like. I'm going to do it. I'm going to call Eleanor Holmes Norton, who represents Washington, D.C., and just ask her to sign on.
We'll go ahead and pause the recording while everybody calls.
But I wanted to make sure that, we're sharing information about this really exciting piece of legislation. And that is the Post-Disaster Mental Health Response Act. So this deals with the trauma of disasters, and disasters could be anything from, a terrorist attack, a mass shooting, mass violence event, to natural disasters, floods, hurricanes, these disasters that, in different ways, depending on the disaster, can really impact the community, the mental health of the entire community and also individuals. When you lose your home during a flood and from hurricane damage, there goes your, equity and your savings and your favorite bookstore. Or if there's a mass tragedy or violent event, not everyone can easily access, personalized, individualized resources, nor is that a full response, right? We really want the community to be able to have the resources to come together after something like this. So the FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which comes in the aftermath of disasters, FEMA and the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, jointly have this program. It's called the Crisis Counseling Assistance and Training Program, or CCP for short. They provide, it's like a reimbursement grant. So after certain disasters, the state can reach out to FEMA and they can request assistance under CCP to reimburse a strategy to address mental health. And this is really an incredible community model where the agencies will come in and they will train community members in mental health response. So then the communities can then do things like do educational outreach on coping skills, host peer support groups, create hotlines, emergency mental health hotlines, help with referrals to mental health counselors. And this program has really been shown to decrease longer term, PTSD, substance use disorder, depression, anxiety, and things like that. So it's a really incredible program. Unfortunately, it's not available for every disaster. So there are two types of disaster declarations under the Stafford Act. One is the major disaster declarations. So these are the huge disasters, the really expensive ones like COVID, September 11th attack, Hurricane Katrina. But then there are emergency declarations. There were 4,000 over the last 10 years for more localized disasters that require less than $5 million in assistance. And these do not currently have access to this program. So you think about the Boston Marathon bombing, some of these mass shooting events like the one in Nevada a couple of years ago, flooding, local hurricanes, the building collapse in Florida. None of these received any mental health support under this program. And so the Post-Disaster Mental Health Response Act changes that. It's a very simple fix and it's inexpensive. And it basically says the crisis counseling program is going to be available following any disaster declaration, including emergency declarations. This bill has received a ton of support so far. It was introduced in October in the House with bipartisan support. So the co-leads were Congresswoman Presley, my boss at the time, Congressman McKinley, who was a Republican from West Virginia, Congresswoman Titus, who is a Democrat from Nevada, and Congressman Peter Mayer, who is a Republican from Wisconsin. Shortly after, it was introduced in the Senate by Senator Durbin and Senator Portman. And then 2 weeks ago, the Senate Committee of Jurisdiction unanimously passed the bill out of its committee. So some of you may know, or some of you may not know, in order for a bill to become law, if it's a bipartisan bill that can pass unanimously in the Senate, you essentially need it to be introduced, passed by the Committee of Jurisdiction, and then passed in the Senate, and then go over and pass it in the House, or vice versa. So we're nearly there. It passed the committee in the Senate, and next week it's having its own markup in the Committee of Jurisdiction in the House. So following that, all that's left is for members of leadership in the House and the Senate to bring it to the floor for a vote. And we're very, very close. We've got a ton of bipartisan support for this. The FEMA administrator says she supported this. There's so many different groups, from emergency responders to the American Psychological Association, American Hospitals Association, who support this alongside CTIPP. So we're really excited and really hopeful that we can get this done. After it passes the House Committee of Jurisdiction next Wednesday, fingers crossed, we will be trying to organize support for leadership to bring it to the floor for a vote. So look out for opportunities to join, whether it's a sign-on letter or an event or things like that, to really build momentum for this bill to pass. In today's political climate, it's not always easy to get bills passed. And so having a win like this would be, really incredible for our movement, to be able to provide that community resilience in the face of these, especially these natural disasters, which seem to be increasing over the years. So really excited about this one, and please keep a lookout for additional updates on this and additional opportunities to engage. And with that, I will hand the mic back over to our facilitators for the rest of the presentation today.
Thanks so much, Jen. Thank you everyone for participating in that advocacy journey, demystifying the advocacy process. A wonderful, I think a very successful time together. So thank you all, and Jen, thank you again for sharing information on the APPROPES bill as well as the Post-Disaster Mental Health Response Act. Certainly more to come there. We have one question in the chat. If there are other questions that anybody has about anything, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will do the questions and answers at the end of the CTIPP Can Call, as we always do. So that way we leave time for all of our presentations. We have with us, as Dan introduced at the beginning of the call, Rebecca Roebuck, who's a policy expert, facilitator, and champion for systems-involved youth and families. As the Director of Policy and Partnerships at Child Focus, she supports nonprofits, young people, philanthropic leaders, and other advocates in making change to improve the lives of children and families. Rebecca, looking forward to your presentation. Thank you so much for being with us. I will make you co-host so you can share the screen.
Thanks, Jesse, and good to be with you all. I am a longtime friend of CTIPP and was really excited when Dan and Jesse asked me to come join you guys today. And I've joined as a participant in the past, so it's a little different being on the other end. My work overlaps with yours a lot, and at some point I'll come back and talk about CAPTA, which I think I've given updates to this group on in the past. But today I'm actually here to talk to you guys about a new and emerging policy reform campaign that is focused on improving outcomes for young people transitioning from foster care to adulthood. That campaign is called Journey to Success, and I'm going to put the link to our new website up in the chat so that you guys can check it out. There's it's a pretty bare bones site as it is, but you may be particularly interested to check out the resources tab on that webpage, which provides a lot more information about how the campaign came together, the policy ideas, and some ways of getting engaged. I do have some slides that I can share, but would encourage you to please chime in at any point and ask questions as we go along. I would love to not just talk at you for 30 minutes, so please don't be shy. And without knowing all of the different things that you all are involved in at the ground level, other than you are the foremost experts on trauma and ACEs services and communities, would be very curious to hear to what extent you're working with young people with experience in foster care or families who touch the child welfare system, and to what degree these ideas resonate. And similarly, if you have partners that you work with, particularly young people with experience in foster care who might be interested in these ideas and getting engaged somehow, please let me know too. This work is still in very beginning stages, but we're excited to share what this is all about and where we think things are headed in the coming months and years. So let me, here we go. So I want to start just by providing some background on the project and how this came together. And to do that, and actually this is a nice maybe segue from the presentation that you just heard from Jen about the legislative process. There is one program at the federal level that is designed to support young people transitioning from foster care to adulthood, and that is known as the Chaffey Program, named after the late Senator John Chaffey. And it was created in 1999. It was one of the first bills that was based on the advocacy of young people with experience in the foster care system. It came about because legislators at the federal level heard directly from those young people about the needs that they had after exiting foster care and how inadequate the child welfare system was at providing supports during that critical time in a young person's life. And so in 1999, we got the Foster Care Independence Act, the John H. Chaffey Foster Care Independence Act. This actually built on some prior work in 1985 that provided a little bit of support to help young people from their transition to from foster care to adulthood. But it was not terribly significant. 1999 really was the time that the program as we know it today was created. And since then, we have seen a steadier sort of cadence of federal policy reforms that were guided by and grounded in the perspectives of young people from care. And that is what this slide tries to lift up. In 2008, we had a big bill called the Fostering Connections to Success and Increasing Adoptions Act, which extended foster care to age 21, or provided states with the option to extend care to age 21. We had some further reforms to help young people in foster care in the Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act of 2014, mostly aimed at making their child welfare experience more normal, and there's some language in there for that. We also had some reforms in the Family First Prevention Services Act, which did a lot of things, and older youth was not a big part of that, but it made some important reforms to help expand access to supports for young people transitioning from foster care to adulthood. And then finally, most recently, during the pandemic, Congress appropriated $400 million through the Chaffey Program to provide direct relief for young people in care. It was a real recognition of the Chaffey Program and the infrastructure that's there to help direct services and supports directly to young people who need them, young people in foster care who need them, who may not necessarily be connected up with other means of support. And all of this, even though this is a slide about the legislative history of the Chaffey Program, I think really speaks to the power of youth-led advocacy. And we are really in this campaign looking to take the next step and continue this journey of youth-led advocacy through the Journey to Success campaign. And that is what I'm here to talk about. So this project originated with a focus on the Chaffey Program because it is the primary funding stream and federal program designed to support young people during this transitional time. It's a fairly flexible source of funding. Up to 30% of it can be used for room and board for youth over 18. It is just generally available to support current and former foster youth. And it provides lots of different types of services in addition to being able to support room and board and other concrete needs. But something like only less than 50% of young people ever benefit from the services that Chaffey provides. So they never even see Chaffey type services or supports. So it's really falling short, both in terms of the outcomes that we see for young people, as well as just its reach in helping young people in general. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you all, young people who age out of foster care, while there are amazing, amazing leaders who come out of foster care in general, we really cannot accept the outcomes that they continue to experience. Too many exit out of foster care only to become homeless. Too many are not graduating from high school or college. Too many are not achieving their career goals or having the economic stability that they need. And Chaffey is just really not measuring up when it comes to meeting their needs. And there are very few other federal supports that are directed at this population of young people. So this project began in the fall of 2020 when a group of foundations supported a small group of consultants, including me, to conduct a series of focus groups with young people with experience in foster care to talk to them about that experience. And what we heard from them was three major things. Number one, and this is part of what I want to focus on with you all, that they have a real need for healing. And, because they have entered the foster care system in the first place, there has been some toxic stress in their lives. Often there is a traumatic event that leads to them entering the foster care system. And their parents were not given the supports that they needed to keep their children. And yet the foster care system really does very little to prioritize the health and healing of young people who are in foster care. So there's a huge need to do more, both within the foster care system itself and during that transitional time. So after young people age out, to support their health and healing. And I'll give you a little bit more details about the types of policies that have emerged from those conversations on health and healing in a moment. The second big theme that emerged was the need for family and permanence, and preventing young people from entering foster care whenever possible, preventing young people from aging out of foster care by ensuring that they can be connected to their families while in foster care, and ultimately reunify with their families. And if that is not possible, making sure the child welfare system is prioritizing giving them opportunities to develop lifelong relationships with adults with whom they have meaningful relationships, so that they have somebody in their corner during that transitional time in their lives and beyond. And then the third big theme that we heard from young people was the importance of economic stability. And having a job is great. Being in college is great, but it's really hard to be successful if you don't have stable housing or if you don't have a way to get there. So that solid economic foundation was another huge, huge theme that emerged from the focus groups. So once we did the focus groups, we did some vetting with the young people. We also talked to a variety of policy experts, and then ultimately developed a set of what we feel are bold, and hopefully also feasible federal policy reforms that we will be promoting to Congress in the coming years. And we heard a variety of quotes from young people from the focus groups, and this was one that really stuck out. You expect me to take on the world at age 18. When really, you know, those of us who had, even who were not in foster care, you know, I think of myself at 18 and how ill-equipped I was to really take on the world myself, and how much support from my family really helped me out. And without that same level of support, how easy it would have been to, you know, not really achieve any of the things that I have. The other thing that really stood out related to health and healing is for some of the young people, particularly the ones who actually had gone on to college and, you know, never been kind of the ones that their caseworkers worried about, so to speak. They found themselves in this transitional period in life, all of a sudden on their own, trying to make ends meet, trying to be successful in school just as they always had. And all of the mental health needs just coming up, just really hit them in the face as adults. And they weren't sure exactly, you know, where to get the supports that they needed, and, you know, understood, you know, in some cases for the first time, how important that mental health and healing support really was. So in addition to reforming the Chaffey program, which, you know, we do have a whole set of recommendations there that I'm not going to focus on too much here, other than to say part of how we are sort of reimagining the Chaffey program itself is by building in some additional supports, both within the foster care system and as young people age out. So after they exit the foster care system, to ensure that they have access to community-based mental health resources that are, that they say are the types of resources that they need. And I'll get into those in a minute. And you all know that this is in many ways, a great moment in time politically to be pushing ideas like this. And I would also say something that in the child welfare space, I think we have really benefited from and continue to feel really fortunate for is we have strong bipartisan champions in child welfare. And I think the same is true for ACEs and trauma work as well. So, you know, in addition to the advocacy that we're doing this year, you know, definitely plan to continue this into next year and in the coming years, no matter what the political landscape looks like. So this is a nice overview slide of the recommendations that we are putting forth. And I want to spotlight one in particular that I thought would be most relevant to your work. And again, most related to health and healing. So this is a snapshot of some of our health and healing recommendations. And I want to reiterate again, you know, even though I myself do not have lived experience in foster care, these have been vetted and informed by young people every step of the way. And, you know, we'll be looking to those young people to be the messengers when we make the case to Congress as well. So I just need to move my little Zoom screen out of the way. Sorry about that. Okay. So one of the recommendations is expanding the scope of services that are available and funded through Medicaid. So one of the things that we heard, and I would love to hear your feedback on this as well, because you all are working at the ground level every day on these issues. Something that young people said is that traditional talk therapy is great when they can access it, but they also would really benefit from lots of other alternative types of services as well, peer supports, non-traditional health, behavioral health supports, and things of that nature. So that is part of our recommendations. We're also proposing to increase the FMAP, which is the reimbursement rate from the federal government to the states through EPSDT for young people who have experienced foster care. And then take additional steps to really end the inappropriate use of psychotropic medications for young people in foster care. Psychotropic medications tends to be the sort of default treatment for young people in foster care. And we've heard all kinds of stories, not just in this project, but all through the years of just young people in care being prescribed crazy amounts of psychotropics rather than really supporting their healing in other ways. And then just a few others too that I wanted to uplift. As I mentioned before, there are some recommendations to redesign the Chaffey program specifically to focus on health and healing and to help ensure that young people are well connected to health and healing services. Also, lots of emphasis on funding for an array of community-based services, so separate from the child welfare system, services in communities that can support a successful transition from foster care to adulthood. And then improving the options that young people have for supporting their mental health and the complex needs that they have, including non-clinical services, which I mentioned before. So there's a lot more information about these recommendations. Again, under our website, you can go to journeytosuccess.org. We also have both a Twitter campaign as well as an Instagram account, or a Twitter account as well as an Instagram account. We would love for you to follow us there. And I would also just say in conclusion, I'm coming to you guys sort of after this campaign is newly launched. So we are very much building it out as we go. Would appreciate, you following it, and also really look forward to hearing any reactions that you have to the policy ideas, to the approach, and to what extent you're working with young people with experience in foster care and their families, and how these ideas resonate for you.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Thank you for the work you do and for being with us and for the wonderful presentation. I see one question in the chat from the earlier presentation, but it looks like Duana's got her hand up as well. So Duana, we'll come to you in 1 second for the second question, and then other questions can sort of come in and we can have a community conversation. But Jen, there was a question from Mike Ritter after the call activity, which is, are local officials able to make, it was after the presentation on the Post-Disaster Mental Health Response Act. I apologize. Are local officials able to make disaster emergency declarations like a county commissioner, mayor, township supervisor, et cetera?
It's a great question that gets into the weeds of emergency declarations, but under the Stafford Act, the President of the United States will be the one to make the emergency declaration, the major disaster declaration, but usually that's following advocacy from the state itself. So you'll typically have the governor of the state write a letter to call on the president and ask for an emergency declaration or ask for a major disaster declaration. And then the president will, either accept or deny that. And so you'll often see your county commissioner, your mayor, your township supervisor calling on the governor to advocate for this. And then the president is the one to make that decision.
Thanks, Jen. We got Duana and then Patty. And others, if you want to ask questions, feel free to use that raise hand feature in the Zoom chat.
Thanks, Jesse. And Rebecca, thank you for your presentation. I'm glad that they're taking another look at Chaffey funds. I spent over 10 years in the field as a CPS worker, so I've experienced it from beginning to end, from removal to adoption. And what I've noticed, and I'm glad you're taking a look at it, is sometimes the folks who have hold of the Chaffey funds cherry pick who they give those Chaffey funds to, even though that they're obligated to give it to them. That's one thing I think you can look at. Additionally, I'm not sure what your youth panel looks like. It's been my experiences that the voices of the folks who are on those youth panels are providing insight in terms of their experience in foster care, or kids who are the success stories and or who may have had some struggles. But I have a sensitivity for our disabled youth, those who are cognitively limited and or very disabled. And I know sometimes we forget them in those spaces. And so I try to champion for them, because those are the ones who end up being our homeless youth, as well as those who have what I like to call generational cases. And so they just continuously, for generations in their families, go through the child welfare system. But, you know, Chaffey has proven to be beneficial for some of the families that I've worked with. When you know your rights and what you have access to, you can champion for it a little differently. And so I think some of it comes from educating parents and young people, and even some state agencies, as to they have access to this money and you can't cherry pick who you want to give it to or how. But I also think some financial literacy should come behind it, because, you know, they get so dependent on us as a system for doing everything for us, and then we give them this money and then they have no way of knowing how to balance that out. Financial literacy, I think, would be a great component in terms of the Chaffey funds, in order to gain access to it, so that we can teach our young kids how to be more fiscally responsible.
That's so helpful, Dwana. And would you mind sharing a little more about what you're doing now?
I work in the Office of Resilience. So we're responsible for the state action plan here in New Jersey, I should say. But prior to that, I was in the field for 10 years as a worker, and then moved into policy work in adolescent services. So I was able to see from really an experience in terms of being in the field and in the community with these families and children, and then to see what it looks like on the policy service provider end, and where the disconnect is. And there is a disconnect, a large one there. And I wrote some work on how to better improve the financial literacy of our kids in care. Because what we do know is that having your own bank account is a problem when you don't have an adult person to open that account with you. And there is one state who passed legislation in order to have the child be the sole owner of that account. Because what resource parents don't want is a responsibility should they do something fraudulent in that checking account, which then puts them into the check system, which means that they are going to be damaged for years to come.
Right.
And so I think that's something that we need to push also throughout the states and through child welfare, in passing that same legislation where they are the sole owners and they are solely responsible for whatever they should do within that checking account. So there's some holes and some gaps there. But, you know, I'm willing to talk about anything that you may need based upon my years of experience. And I'm not too far removed from the field either.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like there's tons of overlap still. Thank you so much for sharing that. It also made me think about another big theme we heard was just how disempowering the child welfare system is in general for young people. And, you know, that may be appropriate for young kids and, you know, infants and toddlers and young children who need decisions made for them. But thinking about, you know, the developmental needs of adolescents, it's so unhelpful to not give them any say at all in the decisions that are being made on their behalf. So there is another set of recommendations, I would say recommendations sort of infused throughout, of giving young people a meaningful seat at the table in decisions being made about their lives, which are often quite important.
Absolutely. And we have a youth council here in New Jersey where they share their lived experience, and it impacts our policy and practice going forward within child welfare. So that's proven to be helpful to us here in New Jersey. In developing that youth council that meets monthly, and they look through our policy and our practice, and they have input as to how to shift or improve anything that needs to be improved and or changed.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your feedback.
We have Patty and then Carrie.
Hi. Okay, so I have two things I wanted to share. The first one is I started thinking about it because of Jen's discussion with bringing people into the education system. I just want to put my hand down. There we go. So I had read something from Ruby K. Payne. She did Getting Ahead and Bridges Out of Poverty. I don't know if any of you've heard of those, but she wrote, oh, you have, that's really cool, Richard. So she wrote that what she thought would be very helpful was to have a triage of teachers outside the schools, and it would rotate every day. And teachers would be looking for, and then they'd give them a list of children maybe that are coming in sad, or coming in, you know, and coming in without a lunchbox, or coming in, you know, just a variety of ways, maybe in the same clothes, looking a dirty or sad, and they would have different teachers, so they would kind of not miss it, right? Because same people see the same things. I just thought that that might be a neat way, once, you know, there's money to be spent at the schools, just something to think about how to spend the money specifically, besides having those supports, but putting them outside in the mornings when they could really see that first morning interaction as the children are walking in. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention. And then the other one was, I saw with Rebecca, you were part of what you kind of had an overlap of the other thing I wanted to talk about today, which was ACEs Aware. So I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it, but it is Medicaid in California is paying for ACEs screenings. They're paying $29 a year for children under 18. And there's like a program to teach the pediatricians how to talk to families, how to connect them to resources, how to screen them for ACEs and therefore reduce public health costs, right? So as I'm looking at all these pieces coming together, I mean, I just think that if we could get, I'm looking at it here in New York State at trying to get an ACEs Aware program here, but if we could get something federally, I mean, that would just be phenomenal. They also talking about the older kids. So let's say it's someone now 18 who missed it, who's coming out of foster care. There's adult ACE screenings that they can do once in a lifetime. So if a doctor meets somebody and knows that there may be some issues going on behind the scenes, they can do an ACE screening and identify, you know, maybe some of the things going on and connect them with resources. So I just wanted to put those out there, plant some seeds. I don't know, maybe my dreams one day will come true.
Thank you for sharing those. Have you guys taken a position as a network on ACE screenings or universal ACE screenings?
So as a network, we are developing a strategy around a protection against the misuse of ACE scores and do not necessarily condone the universal ACE screenings because of how they can be misused, but recognize that they oftentimes open up really valuable conversations. And so just really want to highlight and nuance the positives of ACE, of the ACE test, as well as some of the places that we need to be cautious when we are doing universal ACE screenings. And as a network, we really just want to push toward universal precaution and a systems level approach to folks who have experienced adverse childhood experiences, complex trauma in other ways, as well as those who may not have.
That makes sense.
And I just want to mention that the screening that I'm talking about isn't the 10 ACE study from the original ACE study. I also agree that that is not a screening tool that was used as a study, right? So I totally get that. But I took this training on what Nadine Burke in California has done. And I just ask you to consider possibly maybe looking at it, because they're not the 10 questions. For children, it's 17. The parents can answer it and just hand in a score. They don't have to say what's going on. So I just want to open your mind to it, because I was taught by Dr. Anda about the ACE study, right? I'm a neuroscience national trainer, and he taught me the study, and he said it's not a screening tool. So I completely value that and respect that. However, the ACEs Aware tool is a different tool than the ACE study tool. And it is meant to identify issues in a family that could either open conversations or set the families with resources. There's also ones called the unidentified, which the family could fill it out and just say, I have a 7. It's out of 17, it's not out of 10, it's not the same study, right? It's not the same questions. So I just wanted to put it out there because I'm totally with you. I felt too like, so I work in family services and I would never use this as a family service piece, but as a pediatrician and looking at the public health aspect and how if you don't deal with it, you know, the ACEs could turn to anxiety, which could then turn into serious public health problems and attach to the DNA and get turned over into the next generation. And so when we talk about preventative, to me, it starts at like really having that conversation with the family. Like, these are the things that, you know, could maybe upset the apple cart, and are these things happening in your house and life, and we can work through them. So that's my piece. I'll stop talking about it now.
Yeah.
No, Patty. Yeah. Oh, Rebecca, go ahead.
No, I appreciate you laying all that out. And yeah, nothing else to add. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, no, Patty, just wanted to say thank you. Obviously, this is an important conversation that could be an entire year's worth of CTIPP CAN calls on its very own. And so we will continue to have the conversation and look into, you know, sort of what we do as a network and continue to learn more together on all ends. So thank you for sharing that valuable information. Really, really appreciate it. And again, sending warmth up to New York. Hopefully it stops snowing very soon. I think that we have Carrie and then Dan and then Richard in the queue.
Okay, let's see. Set timer for 3 minutes. So I'm setting the timer so I don't talk too long, Jesse.
3 minutes, starting now.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, so I'm Carrie Sipp. I'm with PACES Connection. And I had been working as the Southeastern Regional Community Facilitator for PACES Connection for the last 4 years, and now I'm doing strategic partnerships. But we had a healthcare company, Healthy Blue, came to me and said, we want to see how we could help improve the health and well-being of children and families in the foster care system. Give us some ideas. And they said, we love the community resiliency tracker that you guys have. And we want to see how, if, you know, you measure getting information out about PACES science and getting the community involved, how that helps. And so what we did was we worked to get some funding to hire someone to help us with these communities. There were 6 communities to help grow the PACES initiative in communities to talk about the extra toxic stress that children in foster care face. But we also wanted to do some training. And so there are a couple of different neurobiologically based trainings that help children, teachers, parents, anyone with a central nervous system learn how to regulate their central nervous system. And the thought was, we met with Department of Social Services employees first. We met with some foster parents. We met with some foster kids in foster care, and, you know, to find out, does this sound like something that would be worth it? And so we're in the midst of doing what we're calling a dovetail strategy of training to help support the DSS workers and help them learn the 6 skills that are part of this program to help people learn how to regulate their own central nervous system so that they can respond and not react, so that they can come out of their prefrontal cortex, their thinking brain, as opposed to their emotional brain, in dealing with families, children. We're getting it to the parents, we're getting it in the schools, and we're starting to get it to some of the older kids as well through their Say-So programs, and they've got a links program. And the trainings, we've chunked it down into little bite-sized bits where they can learn how to scan their bodies, some different skills that they can use to help, you know, slow their breath, get back in their bodies, you know, use their senses, noticing sights and smells and sounds and colors and tastes and whatnot. Even some physical exercises, for example, pushing against a wall or pushing against the chair, to help ground themselves and get themselves back in their bodies, because we know from the teachers with whom we've spoken, well, the counselors with whom we've spoken, that a dysregulated teacher can't connect with a kid, and a dysregulated kid can't connect with a teacher. So we're trying to get this into the school systems. Guardian ad litems, we've done trainings with guardian ad litems, and again with the DSS workers themselves, because we figure they need some self-care, and this is some good self-care. So I just wanted to bounce this idea off of you, since you're an expert in this, and see whether or not, and it's okay, I mean, if you don't think we're hitting on the right track here, but just to see what you thought about it. So I'm just exposing ourselves. What's your input? And thank you so much for your service. I really appreciate the work that you do.
And Carrie, is that directed at me?
Yes.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think it sounds amazing. I definitely am not an expert on those healing modalities. I think they're fascinating. And I would love to find ways to be able to fund those types of services more through federal dollars. But will confess that I am not at the forefront of that, except with respect to, advocacy on behalf of young people from foster care. But those types of things are exactly the sorts of modalities we heard from foster youth about, and also there's I always forget the name of it, but the rapid eye therapy as well.
EMDR.
Yes. That's another one. And it does feel very much like we've barely scratched the surface in terms of the types of services that our public dollars are willing to pay for, vis-a-vis like what is really being used out there, and what people say are increasingly finding to be helpful for their, regulating their nervous system and healing really serious trauma.
Yeah, and we're quantifying it. I mean, we're doing post-training surveys to get a sense of it. And as I said, we're looking at the entire community as a vessel for DSS workers, parents, and children, and in hopes of getting more education out about the science of positive and adverse childhood experiences. That the community can help wrap families with greater understanding and acceptance and support. And we're looking at ways that we can actually even have, tack into some existing events, health fairs and whatnot, to help provide some positive childhood experiences for some of the kids, because we know that the positive childhood experiences can buffer the adverse childhood experiences, and that if we can get enough of those in there that are culturally appropriate and community-led, not a bunch of not a bunch of people going and putting their will on the will of communities that may not want what we were thinking would be fun and good. It's got to be from them. If that can be a help as well. So thank you for your input.
Well, and I'd love to learn more as you go along with that project too. Are you in North Carolina, Carrie?
I'm in North Carolina, and this goes through, we're hoping we'll get funded for another year, but it goes through November. And it's really kind of the one of the first things like this we've ever done. But PACE's Connection really in the consultative role to apply some direct, find some ways to do some direct support.
That's awesome. And I heard you mention Say So in North Carolina. Actually, one of our young leaders, her name is Mariah Thompson. She is she's involved with Say So and is actually now working with the Institute for Family Success, I think it's called. It's IFS. I don't know if you all have crossed paths with them at all, but I wouldn't be surprised if she is somehow connected up with that too. I'll have to ask her about it.
Well, Say So's a great group, and we love that we've got a young man who's 15 years old who is in foster care. Well, actually, he was just adopted. He was just adopted. I mean, he'd been with his mom for quite a while, and they just closed on all the adoption. But, you know, he's given us some great input. We've got to listen to the kids themselves. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and just thinking about your comment about, you know, those protective factors too, and all of, you know, there's so much work to be done for kids who enter foster care, and there's an equal amount, if not more, to be done to, you know, kind of cut off that pipeline, that inflow into the child welfare system too, by supporting families. And Dorothy Roberts, who some of you may know, is one of the leading academic scholars on this issue, just put out a piece in the Washington Post the other day, and she has a new book on
art.
Yeah, racial disparities in the child welfare system, and I think highlights some of these issues in a really helpful way. I'll drop it in the chat in case you haven't seen it already.
If anybody knows her, I'd love to connect with her, because we would love to give her book some, we'd love to interview her. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
You too. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Yeah, the CTIPP CAN networking is so exciting when that happens. That's just one beautiful example. Others have already taken place on this call as well. Richard, Dan actually wanted to switch with you. So Richard, you are up next with your question.
Sure, I just wanted to add to the discussion on the ACE screenings on how unintended consequences can happen as a result of that. And I appreciated hearing CTIPP's position on making sure that's done correctly, because you don't want to promote ACE screenings that have these unintended consequences. And I know California is doing a great job, because we're involved with a group in California that is also supporting that from a training standpoint, because it's one thing to do the ACE screening, but then what are the doctors going to do next? You know, it's frustrating that my child has a high ACE score. What am I supposed to do, or where can I get help? That can be frustrating. And then at the same time, if you don't have the screenings contextually offered, that people can be afraid to answer those questions, because if I tell somebody my child has child abuse, then that gets my spouse in trouble or somebody else in trouble. And so I appreciate those perspectives there on the importance of doing screenings correctly. At the same time, I also want to comment on the three teacher idea. I mean, so the teachers are sometimes the best ACE screening tool you can have, are the teachers in the school system, because they can see something is wrong and maybe, you know, alert somebody. But still, the challenge is, how do you find those kids that have an ACE score that needs to be addressed in a way that can make it easy for capturing that information and taking action. So I just wanted to make those comments.
Appreciate that, Richard. Thank you. And like we said earlier, we will have a much longer, probably not just CTIPP CAN call, but so folks know, we also want to open up networking calls where we can have these sorts of dialogues, even without a presentation necessarily. I mean, we can have the presentations, but then also just open up and hear from folks all around the country from different perspectives, where we can have these really engaging conversations. You know, before I kick it over to Dan, one thing that I oftentimes think about is that my ACE score is low on the screening tools, but I had some complex PTSD throughout my childhood that would put me at greater risk. And so, you know, not wanting to label any children and certainly not wanting to miss is one of the reasons that we think that, you know, universal precautions and really training teachers to just see signs, or any community leaders, right? I mean, we want to create communities of support all throughout that help us prevent as well as mitigate against trauma that is experienced. And so these are, again, very lengthy conversations, and appreciate all the perspectives that have been raised on the call thus far. And there will certainly be more, I can assure you, throughout our network. Dan, kicking it over to you for whatever question you had.
Rebecca, thank you so much, both for this and for all the great work you've done on CAPTA. I know you want to do a short summary on where CAPTA is, so I'm going to make this very quick. I was just wondering, in your efforts to bring kids back together with their biological family, that very often requires the court's involvement. Are you involving the court system in the policy recommendations you're looking at?
You make such a good point, Dan, that this is a system that's very much legal as well as social services. So our recommendations have a few components that relate to the legal system. For example, there's some recommendations in there with respect to ensuring legal representation for young people and families who touch the child welfare system, which we have a lot of federal tools for, but a lot of families still are not represented. And there are also some recommendations there to really bolster the rights of young parents in foster care, who are some of the most marginalized kids. If you're in foster care and have a child of your own, there's just a lot of scrutiny on you, and there's lots of reasons for that, but you're at very high risk of getting your child removed and placed into foster care as well. And a lot of times that happens without young people even really knowing what their rights are as young parents in care. So there's some recommendations there as well. But you know, our tools are really limited in federal policy for you know, making change on the legal side of things. You know, you can certainly adjust some of the requirements for you know, reunification or things of that nature, but you're right to point out how big the court system is in terms of its influence in foster care. The judges are the ones making most of the big decisions.
Congress provided some money for baby courts, but we're talking about a different level. Is it possible to recommend that Congress provide funding for training of juvenile court systems generally?
Yeah, there is. That's a really interesting idea, and I would want to run it by some of our colleagues who are better versed in, you know, the juvenile court system and family court system. There is a program called the Court Improvement Program that's part of Title 4B of the Social Security Act that provides funding to family courts with jurisdiction in child welfare cases to help provide supports and provide training and things of that nature. And there are some strong professional associations too that I know are working on that. And, you know, come to think of it, it might be interesting to see, you know, to what degree those groups, you know, the ABA, Center on Children in the Law, for example, or there's an organization called the National Center for Juvenile and Family Court Judges in FCJ. I would think that they have done some training for their judges on ACEs and trauma, but I'm not sure about that. And I think that could be a really useful, you know, conversation potentially, or partnership with you guys if you would be interested.
Yeah, Juvenile and Family Court Judges Association has done a lot of trauma training. So I think if you reach out to them, they'd be very interested in helping support what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a great thought.
Just want to lift up a comment. Oh, Mary, saw you pop on. But want to lift up your comment about the need for standardized training in the discussion that we're having here. So thank you for that.
Well, just want to thank you all very much for the chance to be here. And this conversation is making me want to join more as a participant, because I'm reminded of the great conversations that you all have and networking, and just chance to get to know what's happening around the country on trauma and ACEs. So thanks for letting me be part of it, and would love to stay in touch. And I had actually invited some of the young people we have involved in the campaign to join me today, but nobody was available. But next time I come, I'll make sure to bring one of them along so you have the chance to meet them as well. And I'll continue to pass along any relevant information like events or briefings or opportunities to reach young people to Dan and Jesse so they can distribute those to you guys.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thank you for sharing your expertise. For everyone on the call, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I want to put our call to action in the chat one more time. If you haven't signed on already, please do so. Please also share it with others in your network. We are going to close that call end of day Pacific time, so 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's when our call to action is going to close, and we are going to send it along. I want to send a special thank you to my wonderful colleagues. It was awesome to have you all on the call and for our CTIPP CAN network to be introduced to you. Jen, Whitney, Laura, looking forward to the continued work. To everybody on the call, looking forward to the continued advocacy and work together and continuing to have really, really thoughtful and meaningful conversations moving forward. If you haven't already, please sign up for the Building Movement Workshop Series. The last call is going to be next Friday, April 29th, from 1 p.m. to about 4:30 or 5 p.m. Eastern time. And Dan, do you want to take us home and remind us of next month's CTIPP CAN call?
Some of you may have read in the paper about a study done by some professors at Columbia University and elsewhere that in which they paid money to new mothers, and they found that the cognitive ability of their babies improved over the mothers who didn't receive a subsidy. And it seemed to demonstrate that you reduce the stress that mothers suffer because of financial constraints reflects in the baby's development. And the professors from Columbia will be presenting on their study. I think it should be fascinating, and it has just huge implications. So we hope you join us for the May CTIPP CAN call.
We will also highlight a new program out of PACE's Connection, and I have no doubt that we will hear some more about the Post-Disaster Mental Health Response Act next month. Want to give a quick shout out to Sunshine, who I saw on the call as well. And thank you all again. Happy to stick around for a little bit, but enjoy the rest of your day. Be safe, be well, and look forward to seeing you all next month, if not before.